All right, you ready? Okay.
Now I
I feel like you need to throw chalk in the air, like
am.
LeBron James.
I
Yeah,
got that reference.
yeah, you did?
I've seen Space Jam: A New Legacy.
I
Okay.
haven't.
Yeah, he does better acting when he's flopping to the ground in the NBA playoffs than he does.
Oh,
No.
oh,
Oh, snap. Oh, snap. Oh, snap. Go Miami Heat. All right, everybody, we're back. Another Mean Genes. We're dropping in on our favorite late great critic, Gene Siskel. He has crazy opinions. That's one thing that we love about him, amongst many things. And we took a look at three movies that he gave 1.5 star to or less. So we are going to start that. But first, like to say hi to our special guest, Patrick Bromley. How you doing, Patrick?
Great, guys. Thank you for having me back for Mean Genes.
Yeah. Well, Mean Genes wouldn't be Mean Genes without you. After wearing a Crow shirt to the Crow smash cut screening last night, I was thinking of getting like a Claire Forlani shirt to wear to Mallrats. And I found some weird Etsy site where they had like a shirt that was a cup of coffee and it says, I like my coffee hot like Claire Forlani. And I'm just like, that's a stretch.
but accurate.
I like my coffee like I like my Claire Forlani with Brad Pitt's dick in it.
Adam,
I like my. All right, so we are going to kick things off with a Mean Gene review from 1991 for the movie Dead Again, which was the follow up to the much critically praised debut feature by Kenneth Branagh. He did Henry V, and he kind of, people are throwing rose petals at his feet, and he was the next best thing to Laurence Olivier. And he followed it up with a Hitchcockian thriller written by Scott Frank in one of his first screenplays, who would go on to write Out of Sight and Minority Report, amongst a lot of other great movies. And Gene said of Dead Again, Kenneth Branagh proves to be a big show off in this melodrama in which he and his wife, Emma Thompson, who were married at the time, each play double roles as investigators of their past relationship as a troubled couple torn apart by apparent murder. Branagh's contemporary American accent is annoying, and the film's constant intercutting of past and present lives becomes laughable. I'll start with this one. I fell for all of it. Like everything that's nonsensical and silly about this movie, I dug. I like my Kenneth Branagh as goofy as possible, where just the vanity is on full display and he's dripping with flop sweat like this. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, his performance in Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, his performance that from Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit that he copy pasted into Tenet. Um, but yeah, I think I described this to you earlier this afternoon, Patrick, that this is like Brian De Palma if he wasn't a pervert. And this was my first watch of Dead Again. I fell for all of it. It totally reminded me of like a Raising Cain era Brian De Palma movie. I liked that Robin Williams has this cameo as like, I forgot what his name was. What was his name in this movie? It was like something ridiculous.
Cozy Carlisle.
Cozy Carlisle.
Cozy
Cozy
Carlisle.
Carlisle.
Dr. Cozy
Doctor.
Carlisle.
Disbarred
Dr.
or
Cozy Carlisle.
this disgraced doctor, we think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Yoda of the meat locker.
Adam, I this is one of those movies where I imagine you watching it and I'm like, I like there's enough here where I can see Adam enjoying this, and that made me enjoy it a little bit more. Now, Patrick, you are the only one of us who I think had seen this before, right?
Not for 30 years, but I
Okay.
did go see this opening day because, as I was telling Adam, my mom said she wanted to see it, which never happened. So
Mhm.
she took us to the theater opening day. I was like a 13-year-old kid, and Roger Ebert had given it 4 stars. So I was like, I'm all in. I didn't know who Kenneth Branagh was. I didn't know who Emma Thompson was. I was a blank slate. I knew Robin Williams. That was it.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a movie for grown-ups. This movie has twists. This movie has dueling time periods and black and white cinematography and a cool score. And so for 30 years, I've been running around like, Dead Again, pretty good. Dead Again. And then I watched it again yesterday and I was like, okay. I mean, maybe there's a lot that I like. But I will admit that having lived now with 30 years of Kenneth Branagh performances,
Mhm.
I was a little more like, all right, I see
It's
what you're doing.
hard.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Patrick. Like, where I was carrying in my head for, since 1991 that this was classy
Yeah.
for CG. And, Scott Frank also wrote Malice. And this would be like an amazing double feature with Malice because they're both
Ugh.
100%.
cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And I really like it. I mean, like any 90s thriller where like the coup de grace is somebody falls on a giant scissors sculpture. I mean, and it's like deranged hypnotists and things
And
like
that's
that.
like right out of Tenebrae. That's like right out of an Argento film, that whole last sequence.
There's an honest enthusiasm to this movie that you just don't see a lot anymore. I hate to go back to that old chestnut, but you're watching it, you're just like, yeah, they don't do this anymore. You know what I mean? You don't have this level of it, as egotistical as it is, as much of it is clearly a vanity sort of stroking exercise. It is still like deeply enthusiastic about being a movie, and that's
He's so excited to make a movie,
yeah,
like one that isn't a Shakespeare, like an
right,
austere Shakespearean adaptation. It's like, oh,
exactly.
I get to make something kind of pulpy and weird. Okay.
Mm.
And
So,
just
He's going for it.
takes it out for a spin.
all right.
What's next?
Our next movie is 1993's Cliffhanger, directed by Rennie Harlan, starring Sylvester Stallone. Stallone's comeback vehicle of sorts at the time, coming from kind of a shaky period
Yeah.
post Tango and Cash, maybe, where he just kind of had a run of like Rocky Five and Stop or My Mom Will Shoot and Oscar, which is a good movie, just wasn't a success. I also like Rocky Five. I know I'm one of the weirdos who like that movie. But yeah, 93 was a big year for Stallone. He had this and he had Demolition Man. So that was cool.
And then I'm
And
sorry to interrupt, but doesn't he immediately fall off the cliff again? He goes
yeah,
into like
I
The
mean,
Specialist and Judge Dredd and like that run right after this. So it's like Stallone is back, sort of.
Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah. And I remember you wrote like a really good heavy action column about Cliffhanger and kind of talked about this period kind of as a, signpost in his career and everything like that. And it was totally like his sad bastard kind of fealty position. Like if you owned a house and invited Stallone over and he like walked away and you couldn't find him, he's in the room where there's swords because he's falling on them. So
Yeah.
Gene said of Cliffhanger, take away the mountains, and what you have is a howlingly bad action film with a cornball villain out to steal a massive amount of United States currency from federal agents. Out to save the dough and assorted lives is mountain rescue ace Sylvester Stallone, who has been in retirement ever since he incorrectly believed he was responsible for failing to save the life of a trapped climber. Typical of the stupidity here is we can plainly see he wasn't at fault in the film's opening scene. Later, we're treated to assorted, predictable slips and trips and jumps and bumps. Did I mention slides? John Lithgow is a laughable villain, which only makes the mountain scenery that much more impressive. But you don't go to a picture like this to stare at mountains. 1 star. Which I call bullshit because this is some of the best looking mountains I've ever seen in my
I was about to
GD
say.
life.
When it starts with take away the mountains, it's like that's half the movie.
No,
You can't
look at
take
that.
away the mountains.
It's like a giant allowance. It's like if you go to Olive Garden, it's like take
Yeah.
away the Italian food.
Yeah.
This is such an Adam hang up, but like in the opening scene before she falls and stuff, she says like, we're getting dinner after this, right?
Yeah.
And he's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah. And then I just kept thinking how selfish it was that she decided to to fall before dinner. It's like she could have waited. Like they probably didn't even like have anything to eat that night. Maybe they had like a Cliff Bar or something. No pun intended, but like
Why not? I generally like this movie. I have fun with this. I like convoluted '90s action. I do. I like my action convoluted if it's '90s. And this one has a complicated treasury agent plot. It's got a variety of diehard villains. I don't know. I like
It's
this one.
Die Hard on a mountain. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in. Die Hard in the snow? Yes, one please.
it only gets better with age.
Yeah.
The scale is just right. Like it's one of those movies where, you know, like obviously the Die Hard formula is just so foolproof at this point. Like they just knew exactly what they were doing and they could plug almost any villain and any hero into it. But like the big set pieces are like genuinely exciting.
Yeah.
And they're not ridiculous fast X sequences where they're just like they're within reason. And yeah, I mean, like Lithgow sucks in this movie. I'll say, like, I think he's a shitty villain, and he makes a choice, and it's just kind of an annoying one. But
Right.
like to a person, like every other henchman is kind of threatening or interesting or has like some kind of vanity or quirk that makes them memorable. Rooker's great.
Mhm.
Janine Turner's charming. You feel sad when Frank, the helicopter pilot, gets shot. It checks all the boxes. Rennie Harlan knows what he's doing. He's underrated.
Rennie Harlan really was like at the top of his game when he made
Yeah.
this movie. And I remember going to see it the weekend it opened in 70 millimeter and just being knocked out by just how amazing this movie looks, how tense that opening sequence was. And then months later, I watched it on VHS on like a choir tour bus. And I was like paying it all of a sudden, all the scale was gone and it was just the dialogue and the performances. And I was like, I don't know about Cliffhanger, but I was wrong. Cliffhanger rules.
Yeah.
I'm with you guys. I don't love the Lithgow performance. Like,
no, but there's
fine, whatever. I don't love it. If he were a better villain, this movie would bump even higher, but it's pretty awesome. Again, particularly in retrospect, when you look at what we get for action movies now versus what they were giving us in '93, like we were eating good.
A couple things that I noted that I found interesting. I don't think Stallone gets enough credit for being funny. Like I think in a dad joke kind of way, where you kind of roll your eyes at what he said, but then you kind of laugh because you're like, well, that actually was kind of funny. Like he's got one of those in this movie where the one thing I like about him is like he so does not care about the money at all. He's just like destroying it, like throwing it off of mountains, throwing it into helicopter blades. But my favorite is he's trying to keep warm, so they're building a fire, and then he throws wads of cash into the fire, and he's like, "It costs a fortune to heat this place." And I'm like, and finally, another movie that I had not seen, just like Dead Again. This was my first time watch of it. 1994's Stargate, directed by Roland Emmerich. A dismal, old-fashioned science fiction spectacular about a scientist, James Spader, joining forces with a national security expert, Kurt Russell, to investigate an ancient artifact that links them to life on a distant planet. Life on the alien planet is even more boring than the scenes here on Earth. The kind of bloated production made in the late 70s in the backwater of the success of Star Wars, 1 star.
Take away the words dismal and boring, and like I might have written that review.
It's not like, you know, he uses it as a pejorative, but like I don't see any problem with being like an antecedent of Star Wars early 80s fantasy stuff. Like I think this one is like better Crow. Like it's fun.
There's just this weird thing I've noticed with Mean Genes where like Gene will like it's like he's doing like an algebra problem and like all the work is right and then his answer is wrong. And you're like, and you're like, wait, no, Gene, no, what are you talking about?
Again, he leads with old-fashioned sci-fi adventure, and I've already bought my ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they always say like a good critic is you read the review and you might not agree with them, but you know if you're gonna like it based off of what they write. So yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, like I was pretty much on board with the movie the entire way, but like once I saw the Their version of like the Dark Crystal Mystics animal, I was like, oh, this is totally my jam. And
do you agree that there should have been more than one of them?
No.
They introduce an alien animal once for about 6 minutes and then never again.
I love the way Stargate closes, where they're going through the Stargate and then it turns into the light show and then it goes right into the end credits. Like, it's so important how you end your movie, and like now movies can never like know when to end, and it's just great that that's how this one closes out.
I enjoy this film quite a bit, but I'm going to be vulnerable with you for a second, because I believe one thing I've learned is that vulnerability is important in relationships, and you two are two of my best friends, so I want to be vulnerable with you for a second.
Yeah.
I fell asleep for a good chunk of Stargate. I'm not going to lie. About middle 20 minutes or so, probably fell asleep. But
that's the 20 minutes that needs to be cut from this movie. Like, it's 20 minutes too long. Like, at 2 hours, it's a little padded, I would agree. And I say that as somebody who really likes this movie.
I'm all in on this movie. Good weirdo Spader, and not like sex pest weirdo Spader. You know what I mean? Like, not, you know what I mean? Like, good weirdo, just different weirdo Spader. That's all. Not different than everything, but you know, they would typically see him at this time.
I like when Spader like does these big commercial blockbusters because it's so unexpected, and it's like when Nicolas Cage first started doing action movies, you're like, oh, this is such an interesting fit, and he brings such a different energy to this than if they had just gotten an action guy.
And I think it's cool, like, you can tell Spader could do this, but chooses not to.
They never really quite crack what to do with Kurt Russell in this movie.
It literally took me probably 3 viewings before I realized he was about to kill himself in the opening scene. Like, I was like, oh, that's what's happening here? But yeah, agreed. So of the 3 Mean Genes, if you had to pick one to watch again right now, what are you picking?
Cliffhanger.
Stargate, baby.
Yeah, I knew you were going to go Stargate, so I was thinking about going Stargate, but I had to be honest. And the first one that popped in my head was Cliffhanger, so I had to go Cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger rules. There's nothing wrong with Cliffhanger, but I gotta go Stargate.
Which of these movies would you like to have a themed drinks a la Butterbeer to? Like, would you want to have like a themed sand drink in Stargate? Would you want to have a Rocky Mountain drink in Cliffhanger? Would you want to have like a Hitchcockian, not
like a film noir? I want a
The Dead Again cocktail is wine made from 50-year-old cheese. Get the Dead Again drink, you have to go into the meat cooler with Cozy Carlisle.
It would be funny if they walked in there and Will Hunting was there. We will be back next week with a new reserve seating. It is Junesploitation, so we are kicking off our celebration of Junesploitation on June 1st with Teenagers Day, and we will be talking about the follow-up tonight to the movie Class of 1984, Class of 1999, starring Tracy Lind, which I know Patrick is a big fan of, so I'm very much looking forward to watching that. We will be back then.
Not before then. You have to wait.
We've done so many of these, and I don't know how to end them ever.
Okay, Patrick, you end it then. Go ahead.
Until next time.
Until next time. These seats are reserved. Buster.
Oh,